Hello, hello there, everyone. And we're back with our Embracing Your Voice, Unleashing Your Power Within collaborative series. Super excited about this. If you're joining for the first time, welcome. My name is Patricia Hayes. I am an executive advisor, career empowerment coach, and authentic networking strategist. All meaning I love helping people do the things they need to do in order to get to the next level in their lives and to do it with their values intact. That little thing right there. And my partner in crime here today is Miss Brienne Hennessy. Hey, Brienne, how are you doing?
Hi, Patricia. So happy to be back. Thank you so much.
Yes, super excited about this. This is one of my dear biz besties, and we have been talking about doing some work together for a while. And in the context of working on some other collaborative opportunities, I realized I'm like, you know what? We really need to do a session on voice care and utilizing our voice both as a physical tool and as an inner tool. And so here we are, and we made it come to pass, and I'm so excited about it.
I am too. It's one of those things, Patricia, I just have to say, your ability to see and advocate for something that most people take for granted, like we touched on last session, is just really powerful. So thank you for elevating the work that many people overlook. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Well, it's one of those things because, I have to admit, I'm always probably a tad bit selfish because it always helps me just a little bit. And so,
I mean, do what you got to do.
Do what you got to do. And so the first time in our first session, I invite you to go check it out. We're going to have a lovely little YouTube playlist going so you can catch up. But we talked about the hidden prep tool that every public speaker uses but forgets about. And it was a great session. Today, we're going to go digging a little bit around on the health and stamina, and where we're going to give some, very extreme examples. We are going to rely heavily on Brienne's expertise here today on this one, with probably a few examples from yours truly of things not to do.
Yep, what she said.
So as a hint of where we're headed, let me just say that we are continuing our conversation, but not pushing through, which is our lead in to our first item today.
Indeed. What does it mean to push through when it comes to voice for you, Patricia?
Well, it normally means I'm doing something I don't have any business doing, which is I'm like, I really need to get this done. So let me go, make me a few cups of hot tea and get my water all around me. And I'm going to go do this thing, even if I really don't feel like it. I mean, feel like it as in I don't feel well enough to really do it.
Okay. I appreciate that, because it can come across in different ways. For folks, it can be that just general sense of, malaise, things aren't feeling good, fatigue, or in this specific, examples that we're going through, voice changes, but you're like, I can just do that one more thing. But you've already crossed the threshold that it is time to pull back, not push through. So thank you for sharing your experience with that. This is something I see often, particularly when folks are high achievers, are leaders who need to be visible a lot, and who also have, high standards for how they want to show up. And sometimes that is at the cost of their well-being. And I believe voice is a conduit to our well-being. And that means that when we take time with our voice, both in listening to it, warming it up, playing around with what it's capable of, and using it in a way that feels the most comfortable and vibrant and easeful for us, it can in turn help us to stay in better wellness. And the opposite of that is when it's ignored, overtly or not. If there are signals that are being missed or not well understood, it is very resilient, but it's not invincible. So it's not necessarily, this idea that more is more. More will mean I can talk longer. That will build my stamina. We need those periods of recovery and activity, just like the rest of the body with our voice. So yeah, we're gonna talk about that a little bit more today.
I mean, okay, so because Brienne, she slips these like little gems in. So if you're like, what is Patricia doing? Patricia's writing them down so I know where to come back to, because she kind of slides in some things and then you're like moving on. I'm like, I'm not going to let us slide past that. Right. And so there were two things. I only captured one. I'm going to go back to the recording on one. But the one that really stood out that I did capture is that point of the voice being a conduit to our well-being.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I don't think people pause enough. Okay, we're about to get into our little mindset reflection point issues we both have, but we don't pull back enough to recognize that, right? And that it can be a signal to other things that are going on for us. And so it leads to a point of being able to recognize and listen to yourself, not just from the physical voice, but from your internal voice as well.
Exactly. And when that happens, I think we can reap the benefit of feeling renewed, energized, connected because of how we're interacting with our voice, the physical and the inner intuitive voice. And on the flip side, those signals, for those of you who may not be aware, can be as seemingly innocuous as, oh, weird, today my voice was cutting in and out a lot when I was talking. Okay, that's not normal. Or, man, I'm noticing even after an hour of speaking or lecturing or coaching, I'm getting fatigued and tired. Okay, also not normal. All right. When I go to laugh, my laugh just like cuts out, because we usually change our pitch when we laugh. And again, here and there, okay, maybe been a fluke thing, but if it starts to creep in a little more often, not normal. So these are those more kind of seemingly everyday things. Yes, just intuitively listening in as well. When you want to push through that last little task or recording bit, and we'll kind of get into that, and you're starting to feel the phlegm build up, but you decide to just keep throat clearing your way through it, not normal. Okay. Because throat clearing has its purpose in the moment to protect our airway, but chronically, just to start the voice, people think I'll just start my voice by throat clearing. Not normal. So these are just some, if you're wondering what should I be looking for or listening for, those are some of the things to kind of be on just more high alert about. They're the early warning signs. Yeah.
I just love when Brienne calls me out on stuff that I haven't even told her about. Okay.
Did I say a name? She's not wrong. She's not wrong.
Oh my God.
This is how we are.
Look, we're going to talk about the angel on your shoulder next time. Oh my goodness. Yes. The little voice in your ear on your shoulder.
Exactly.
Patricia, are you sure about that? Oh my God.
So great. I love it. Oh my God.
So I know you have some more specific examples of folks, who are pushing through and did. You want to share those with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So keep in mind, I come from a background as a speech and voice pathologist. So when I am speaking to this is not only to be preventative, but also we don't unfortunately have a crystal ball either to why some people will end up with voice injuries and why others won't. We have known risk factors, things like how much are you talking? How loud are you talking? What are the demands on your voice? Are you experiencing some sort of laryngitis or illness that's going to worsen things, allergies, asthma, etc.? But just know that this isn't necessarily fully comprehensive, but to start to give you those little adjustments so that you aren't, again, like we said, pushing through. So for example, how many of you have had your voice either cutting in and out or been on either the early end or even tail end of a cold, and it's the scratchy hoarse sound that kind of persists, but you think, well, I get a little bit of sound, so let me just keep talking. It'll be fine. I'll just do a few things. That is like running a marathon with blisters on your feet.
Oh,
yeah. So you're like, I feel them. I'll just put some second skin on there. It'll be fine. I'll just wrap it up. It'll be fine. you're just band-aiding the problem. So keep in mind that when we are able to mitigate risk, it comes at also taking those steps back to look at, oh, how early did I notice that happening? Has that worsened in how frequent it's happening? Rather than, again, ignoring or pushing through, and then you're at like critical point. So I had just very current client who, she just recently, her business is growing rapidly. She is building in her coaching space, but also her mastermind space. And she led a mastermind in the desert. Okay. She had to fly. So dry air on the plane, led the mastermind in the desert. During the mastermind, had started to notice maybe some sniffles coming and maybe a little bit of dry cough. Okay. And because of the stress of preparation for this event, which how many of you can relate, some of the wellness habits go by the wayside. So she hadn't been doing her voice regimen as much as before. Within 2 days of getting home from the mastermind, she lost her voice completely. And we are still in the midst of triaging that. This is day 4. Now, day 4 is nothing to be concerned about. That's how laryngitis can run its course that way, or some version of overuse too in that way. But she has literally had to cancel meetings, cancel client sessions, not speak with her family in the same way she would. And so that can take its toll. And so this is where, when we looked back at what led up to this, there were moments that could have been mitigated. Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's fascinating, right? Because we're all prone to this. We set the priority. We want to learn more. We want to be aware. But then when life happens, which it does, okay, but what goes by the wayside?
Yes.
Right? So this is where it's a great space to then recalibrate, but also look at, but these things did create the perfect storm for a voice injury, a voice loss, and that subsequent fallout of what you're having to do to recover.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been there. I know that whole laryngitis for multiple days.
It's so frustrating, right? And some of that, I mean, don't get me wrong, I do not have the magic wand for bacterial or viral laryngitis to make that go away. This is speaking more to the myths that I see abound, that people think, one, well, I'll just be silent. Let me just get through a couple more things and then I'll just be silent for the weekend. Okay, voice rest has its place. Being silent is hard. Talkers, please try it for a day. It's not going to be fun. And on the flip side, depending on the severity, you don't know how long that's going to last. So the moment, I see this a lot, the moment you start to get a little sound or it's coming back, you're like, well, 0 to 60, got my full day meetings, got my coaching calls, got my sales calls. Okay. Your vocal fold tissue is not ready for that. Again, we go back to the blister analogy. It's like, oh yeah, it started to resolve, but nope, I'm going to go right back to just, running as much as I was running. So this is one of those things that I want people to be mindful that voice rest can help. Tea drinking, water drinking, staying hydrated can help. But there's even, a more definitive and effective protocol. And we can talk about that because I have a PDF specific to that. But it's one of those things, even my clients. So keep in mind, habits are hard to change for some people, right? So even someone who is preparing and doing the work is still trying to get it into a routine for herself that works. So when other priorities take over, it's okay. Give yourself grace, but the integration isn't there yet. And that's why I love the longer runway for this. I am not about quick fixes. We are not here to be fixed. Okay. This is not something that's like an overnight thing, but Correct. Just think where you can look at what could I have done a little differently? Maybe I could have taken that rest. You are worthy of rest. So do so.
Yes.
And like you said, noticing that if our bodies aren't where they need to be, it will impact everything else we're trying to do.
Yes. I mean, since we're on the topic of type A people, I don't know anything about that. Let's talk about, those people who will, just say, okay, hey, I'm feeling great. I got a lot of recording I need to get done. So I'm just going to sit down and knock it out again. Not quite sure who does that. Patricia.
Right.
And
sorry, I was distracted by the little thumbs down bubble that clearly didn't agree with. He was like, no, that's no good. Don't keep recording and pushing through. Thanks, thumbs down bubble.
Oh my gosh,
so
this is great. When we were planning this, that is one of the first questions that Brienne asked me. She goes, and how many sessions are we going to be recording at one time? And I'm like, okay, I understand already. I've done this once with another one where I thought I was going to quote push through and do it, and we realized that was not going to happen. Exactly. But I've done it, and I want you to speak to this. And so for those of you who don't know, I host a Coffee Time Career Chat twice a week. I have done it for, I think it's over 6 years now. I've lost track. And I was doing it live twice a week. And then I realized that was not going to be sustainable. So I was like, well, let me start pre-recording some. But I'm like, since I'm here, let me just pre-record all 4 sessions at one time. And go do some other stuff all at once. Plus go speak somewhere, live. And so let's talk about the dangers of batch recording and continuing with other additional speaking obligations and what that does for those type A folks out here who will do it.
Who want to just get all the things done.
I just need to get some stuff done.
Yeah. One of the analogies y'all have probably heard me weave in throughout the time already is related to the athlete. No marathon runner is going to prepare for a marathon by running a marathon. So when you look at something like batch recording, and I love that you said this, Patricia, but I've done it before. Yes. Okay, true. You may have done it successfully before. Again, we go back to that risk factor. You're a new person, new day, in this moment. And so we can't always know what fully tips the scales. But when you go from 0 to 60 and expect to, knock out, a 4 or 5 hour long batch record session, that's not going to be sustainable, nor if your voice hasn't been prepared or warmed up or is cared for at different intervals throughout that period, that is going to put more stress and strain on the system. It just will. And so when we look at things like, okay, can you rest it? You could sneak in little 10 minutes of silence in between each recording. Great. What about though, when you're also a type A perfectionist and you think that it has to be perfect every single time, whatever that looks like for you. So instead of doing just 1 or 2 takes, you do like 20. Ugh. That's what happened to one of my clients, even when this was a couple of years ago, when she was just preparing to go live more often, similarly to Patricia's story. And it wasn't even because of her voice. She purely was like, oh, I wanted to say this. Okay, let me do it again. I want to say this. An hour later, she realized she attempted 20 takes and her voice was paying the price. Mm-hmm. She was already feeling weaker. So then she couldn't do any more takes. She's like, no, now it sounds worse. I don't want to go on and do more right now. And so that delayed getting that project done. So it's one of those things where we have to be mindful of yes, what our voice's capabilities are that day, but look at your whole week. So you alluded to this with like the more things. Don't batch record on a time in a week when you already are potentially jam-packed with a bunch of other speaking responsibilities. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, if it is a lighter week, yes, but also can you use your voice warm-ups and make sure that you are kind of noticing how your voice is feeling that day before just diving right in. And so it's similar for any person who is starting a new routine or a new sport. You're not going to run before you walk. And you do have to prepare the system, even though you're using it every day, in a way that's going to feel good, sound good for you, and build stamina over time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. All the things. I'm just so many things going through my head right now. Yeah. I'm thinking about when you said about being mindful of your total calendar, not just what you're doing that day, because, and you and I have talked about this before, not in this context, but we've talked about before. I was not like, I'd go do, like I said, I do a lot of public speaking as well. So I'd go do something, whether it was live in person or whether it was just going live, especially when we were doing so much remote, and how much it would physically take out of me.
Yeah, the draining energy.
And the drainage and how I was not allowing enough time either before to prep, but definitely afterwards to recover. And how, if you're not careful, if I wasn't careful, I could just wear myself out. And especially if you think, I just need a couple of hours to chill out and then I'll be good. So I can go ahead and go do this other thing tomorrow or the day after. And it's like, no, you cannot do that.
Yeah. And that's going to be unique to everyone in different seasons, even for each person. So definitely always looking at that. And that's where I love, again, the fact that our voice is a barometer. So it will, one of two ways, start to show us either through kind of feeling a little weaker, maybe straining a little bit more. So you think, I'll just go rest my whole body. But if the voice, even after that body rest, is not yet fully back on track, that gives you another indication that it's ready for that conditioning and that training. It needs that extra support. And I think that's where we do start to think that if we're not doing, that we're not worthy. And so I just had a client recognize that, I want to honor how she said this, that she felt in order to fully show up, she always had to be speaking. That was her way of doing it. So I think we have to look at that too. Are you using your voice and pushing through it because that's the only way people will hear me and I need to just keep going and be heard? And that can build up pressures as well and drain you, which will then drain the voice, the breath holders. I see you, all of these things that clamp down on a system that's meant to open and flow and feel very resonant and easy.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I mean, that's not even on our list about the impact of stress.
We could make a bonus session for that.
Oh my God, that's a bonus session. I mean, we may have to come back to that, but that's what when you talked about that holding the breath, I'm like, that's all, especially, I mean, you have some nerves moments when you do that, but when you're stressed and how that impacts you as well. Yeah. Oh man. Okay.
Yep. It's a big one.
All right. Well, we'll have to think about that one. That's a whole different thing.
That sounds good. And can I just touch on, because we were saying with the batch recording too, something that often people don't think about as much, posture. And I don't actually mean like you're not sitting up straight and all stiff. I mean, at least be in a comfortable, ergonomically, correct space for your body, because this is often what yes, ma'am. Those are exactly with, if you can, like the hips elevated a little bit, making sure the feet are flat on the floor. This is not going to be helpful if your mic is here or here and you're in this kind of position. But I see that a lot. I see that a lot with audiobook recorders. Yeah. I see that a lot with podcasters, with batch recording. If you're not on camera, especially, let's say, but even if you are, there's this sense of just a little bit of protrusion with the neck in ways that are going to strain the muscles. And that strain there can also influence the voice stamina. Yeah. So just be mindful too of how you're positioning yourself. And even if it has to feel as simple and straightforward as doing a couple breath practices alone won't warm up your voice, but even just to see, okay, good. I can access my breath easily. I have movement through my body. I'm not kind of getting myself in a rigid space. That's going to make a huge difference in your recordings as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. The pillow behind the back. I've always been one of those kind of like, a little bit better posture, not just because speaking, but just in general. But I definitely, people are like, oh, you have such good posture. I'm like, no, I got a good pillow.
Yeah, exactly.
Like 2 or 3 of them.
Exactly.
Right?
You got to have, but then you're more elevated here.
Yeah.
Lungs, chest are open more versus it crunching. And that's already going to reduce the airway, okay, through the lungs. And that's going to just make that breath get more shallow. Shallower breath is going to be harder to really support the voice starting. And it just can lead to more fatigue than what you need, you know?
Yeah. All these things that no one thinks about for this lovely little tool of ours that gets so overworked.
Yes, it does.
So overworked. Let's talk a little bit about, because that's, and this may get into a little bit some of this Band-Aid mode triage and some myths going on. But, I'm a lawyer by training. Most people know that. And you want to talk about classic, type A personalities that will just go, go, go. And even if it's not, let's say, a traditional presentation that's going on for like CLE or something, but let's talk about, someone who's going to court every day and having to speak up and be advocate and having some professional stress that's just built into it, right? Yeah. And what that does, and some of those Band-Aid triage moments that go on for professionals who are dealing with that every day.
It's one of those things. So when I was in the voice clinics, I would have both younger, early career attorneys come in and older attorneys. One judge who was very insightful about it too. He was older as well. And it was interesting to hear the stories relative to, yes, the stress that comes along with the role, the expectation of how one should present oneself depending on the environment. And honestly, in the case of a couple of them, because they were women, having to use a voice that maybe didn't feel like themselves, but they had to do it in order to maintain that sense of presence and authority in a certain situations. So with that, I think that's where too, we have to be okay with the fact that we all have different facets to our voice. We have choices with our voice. If you want to use your courtroom voice and nurture that and condition that voice, which is going to be different than, you're talking with your friend voice or your mom voice, if that's the case, or whatever the, situation may be, embrace that, because this goes back to the pushing through. If you allow your voice to live kind of in the same zone all the time, that's missing out on so much variation that's available to you.
Yeah.
And I think that too is when people start to say things like, I don't really sound like me, or this isn't really what, my voice normally sounds like, or others will start to say, there's something going on with your voice? Like, what's wrong? Whatever. And it may have been so subtle that it started to creep in these little crackles or changes or scratchiness that you didn't even really notice. And so this is one of those things that, again, it's not to have you overthink, overdo. It's just to know that you can shift even the smallest thing in how your voice can be optimized. Yeah. I would say too, the other thing that then when we get into, okay, other people have started I did have that once. I had a client, her audience, her community kept reaching out to me saying, have you talked to her? Like, are you working with her? No. What are you talking about? She needs you. Like because they were worried about her at that, at that point. So like, and I think that's so sweet and kind. And by the time, yes, then we did get connected and it was great. And she did wonderfully, but it was one of those things that I was just like, people will give unsolicited advice. We get that. And at the same time, when it starts to add up, you got to go, okay, what am I going to do? Now, she was able to then take the step and proactively, get to work and we did the work together. Other people do what I like to call crowdsource their healthcare. And when they're not sure what's going on with their voice, they'll put up a post and say, oh, I lost my voice. What do I do? Well, people are going to show up with their opinions on that one. And so, yes, ask friends, ask family. Of course, we get lots of sage, tidbits from people we know, but we go back to that idea of what's the cost? You are doing things that potentially aren't going to be suitable for you. for example, like hot tea, lemon, and a shot of bourbon. Don't do that, but people still recommend that. People still all up in the comments.
I wonder which part of that you're not a fan of. I don't know.
Well, type in the chat if you think which part. I'm just kidding. Like, let us know. It's one of those things like well-meaning. I'm sure most people are well-meaning, but when we look at how can we get the fastest path to starting that recovery, that's when you need to just go straight to the source, because you are delaying time. You are potentially, underutilizing tools that you have at your disposal already.
Right.
And it's one of those things that just perpetuates these myths, that things, drinking olive oil. That's a thing.
That's a new one for me. I've never heard that one.
People, it's been around it's more so initially in the singer community, but people be like, oh, drink something. Those things don't touch your vocal folds. Thank goodness. Because then we would be having a whole other kind of issue. So people are trying to do very anecdotal, soothing kind of things. Like if you put lotion on the skin, for example, great, feels good, but none of that is affecting the mechanism. Remember when we talked about either this session or last session, your breath supporting your voice, supporting that resonance coming out, that may be all out of whack. I don't care how much olive oil you drink. It's not going to change anything with how you're using your voice. Okay.
Well,
and no shade to anyone who drinks olive oil. It just won't help your voice. I promise.
Yeah. And, I was just thinking about that though, when, in terms of the crowdsourcing, which you say, you get these great anecdotal, but here's the thing. If you are using your voice as part of your profession, this is the really key part. Like, this is a part of your work. Like, this is how you deliver your work. Yeah. And so while, again, anecdotally for someone who's just like, oh yeah, I got to sort through, what should I do? Versus, this is what I do every day for my living. And I need some tools to help me to perform, not just so I can speak and have a conversation at dinner, but so that I can go give that speech before 300 people tomorrow.
Exactly.
Like, that's a different thing.
Absolutely. And I think once people are willing to embrace that as part of who they are and how they use their voice, that's going to shift what you see it, whether you see it as a priority or not.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. All right. Let's talk about this self-care thing.
Yeah. When it comes to self-care, I believe that voice care is self-care, and we can, that's a lot of different ways that people can look at self-care, but we've alluded to the really important pieces of listening to your body, resting more in ways that nourish you. And sometimes that means physical rest. Sometimes that means getting out in nature. Sometimes that means saying no, setting boundaries, protecting your time. I still love this phrase. I learned it a couple of years ago. No is a complete sentence.
Yes.
And honestly, when it comes to back to the physicality of your voice, if you are spent and you are done, you want to be as concise and brief as you can with your voice. No, I'm done talking. Thank you. You have to be able to hold that space for yourself and put up those boundaries, because Brienne, I can still hear you. Your voice sounds fine to me. Cool. I'm done. I need to take a break. So I think that's too, obviously important in a bigger setting for your day, your schedule, your activities, and making sure that you are taking care of yourself in that way, but also trusting yourself, allowing your rest to be a choice that you are not dismissing. And so that's how I mean, in a small way, look at voice and self-care, because like you were just saying, if you're doing this every day as part of making sure you are an optimal performer, that is going to feel nourishing rather than depleting. Absolutely.
Yes. Okay. Love it. All right. We're down to our leadership voice nugget for today. I don't know. I've got a couple of things that are popping up for me, but I think I'm going to offer up the fact of being respectful and mindful of your voice, again, and we referenced it being your tool, but how when you need help professionally for other things, you don't just go randomly asking anybody off the street to help you with your, world-class litigation issue or your big, huge problem that you have, in crafting this speech that you're about to give to 5,000 people. So why would you do that with the vehicle that's going to help deliver that message? That's going to help deliver it. So that being much more aware and deliberate, I guess the word is what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
About your voice and its care, and when to say when.
Yes.
I think that's going to be my nugget for today. Beautiful. What about you?
I was about to say we'll leave it at that because that was delightful. I got little tingles in my body. It's a good sign. I did have a word that a client used at the end of our work together. Freedom. That really is something that can show up in a lot of different ways. And I think when it comes to freedom with your voice, freedom from the worry, freedom from having to edit how you want to show up, that's what's possible. So the sooner the better means that you are activating that through more areas of your life as well. In your communication, in your relationships, in your work.
Awesome. Love it. Love it. All right. It's been awesome yet again. And make sure to check us out at our websites that are going to be linked in the comments and on our link trees. And Brienne, do you have something for this?
Well, yeah. So this is something that we can put in the mix as well. So it's really been, like I said, I feel so honored that people know that they can have a trusted, safe space to be like in my DM saying, what do I do? But I also recognize that I am one person, and so I created essentially a voice emergency kit PDF. It gives you kind of that starter protocol of what to do when you are in that acute stage of my voice is struggling. What am I going to do? And so that's something that, I thought might serve folks, kind of meeting them where they are. And then there is the opportunity to work with me a little more one-on-one, because some people really like the check-ins. I usually do voice screenings. So what I mean by that is while I can turn it off, I also am able to hear certain things in voices that help me know what your next best step should be, and how the voice is behaving. Just because, again, I've listened to thousands and thousands of voices over the years, who have struggled with different types of injuries. So that PDF, it's only $27. It'll be linked in the show notes as well. And I think it's something that gives you that evidence-based, effective approach rather than maybe crowdsourcing.
No crowdsourcing. No crowdsourcing. Oh my God. So, and I laugh there because this leads perfectly into our next session where we're going to talk about the little angel on your shoulder whispering in your ear. And y'all get to hear all of my lovely little stories, and Brienne saying, "So Trisha, what is that I hear?
You did what this weekend?"
What? You and what were you doing at that football game? And all of the things. I'm going to tell all my business, how I will suddenly hear her beautiful voice in my ear saying, "And what are you really doing, and why?" So that'll be fun. We're going to have fun with that one.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. Oh,
Oh my
thanks,
gosh,
guys.
it's been awesome yet again. Don't forget, we're collecting these in a lovely little YouTube playlist so that you can go back. And of course, always check in on our social media platforms to go gather them up before they disappear. Just saying. So let us know, reach out if you have any questions, concerns, comments. We would love to be able to answer some questions if they come up. Drop them in the comments below and we'll incorporate them into the next session. Until then, have a fantastic week, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.